Hey y'all, it's Sarah. You can see I've got some more patriotic colors laying out here. This one is the one I said I was going to do for my Texas friends. You guys completely understand. It's a thing we do. We decorate with the Texas flag, so I'm going to create one that matches the vintage American flag that I just posted. So I want to go ahead and jump in and get started. You can see I have some Readi-board brand foam board in front of me. If you're not familiar, this is like poster board material, and you find it in the same area, except for it's a little bit thicker. It's got this foam center in it, and it comes in a 20 by 30 sheet. This video is sponsored by Readi-board. I have got the black that I'm going to be using as my backer, and I've also used just the white that I have cut down into different size strips. I have done my faux finish on those. The faux painting technique are their own videos. I do have one that is set up with the red and blue colors. This lighter kind of raw maple looking color is its own video, and then the barnwood colors are their own video, just because they take more detail to get those. But I want to really quick run through the sizes of things that I'm going to be using. You can always adjust this to fit whatever space you're working on, but I wanted this to match the one that I already did, so I'm going to stick with that scale. I'm using the full sheet of 20 by 30 as my backer in the black, and I'm using black because it gives you a much cleaner back of your project, and then when you're finishing out your edges, you don't have any of the white showing through once you paint these sides. So that's why I go with that. If you just have white on hand, you can use white. It just may take you a little more effort when you go to clean up your edges some. I've got even if you're using your black, by the way, these 1-inch filler kind of strips, you could go with white on those too, just however that one that's going to work out for you. These I already had, that's why I'm using the black, but we are filling in with these particular pieces. So in my framing, I went with a 1.5-inch frame. These are currently cut at the 30-inch length. I'm going to be trimming those down to fit and doing a very basic frame on this. And the reason that I point out doing a 30-inch cut is this is manufactured in that direction, which means that foam inside is manufactured that way. And it does have some natural ripples in it. I don't know if you can see them very well, but maybe you can hear when my fingers hit them. When you cut against that, it can give you more jagged edges. So when you cut the short way, you notice that your edges may not be as clean and smooth because you're cutting against that kind of grain to the foam center. Same thing happens when you paint. These kind of ripple areas end up showing in your faux finish. So I typically paint in the long direction and cut in the long direction. Next thing I've got is my white or light color, this kind of light maple color. You could have gone with just using plain white, but I felt like it was a little stark, so I'm using kind of this creamier vintage looking color. These are cut in 3-inch by 21-inch. My red tone, same thing. There's 3 of those cut in the 3-inch by 21-inch. And then my blue tones, I have these cut down to a 3-inch by 18-inch. And all of these are just going to kind of puzzle piece together. I wanted to try to make this really simplistic so that maybe I had a little more time to get into ideas for hardware, because I have been asked on getting some of the hardware looks. I'm going to be sticking with the similar hardware that I did with my other one, but I will try to get some ideas in there if I can get this thing up. There we go. So my first step, I want to go ahead and jump in and get this, this kind of filler piece in. This is going to help me get my other pieces lined up. It's going to chunk up my frame some. So I'm going to go ahead and get that glued down. I try to glue anything that's going along those edges really, really well. that's where you tend to have separation, and when it pops up, it can peel that paper surface up, which means it can peel up your paint finish. The better you get these edges sandwiched together, the better off you are in the long run. Honestly, it really helps your edge get a much cleaner look. So I'm going to try to figure out which direction that, or kind of which pattern I want these in. They're from random batches. These already had done. They were from different batches, which means the coloring's slightly different. I'm going to try to mix those up. So I think this is the pattern I'll likely work with for my white. One of the things I want to suggest, and I pointed this out on my other videos, is the edges have a perforation where the bigger sheets have been cut down, and you can kind of feel it. If you didn't cut along those and you cut and you still have one edge that's got that perforation to it, make sure that's the one that hits to the end of your project on this side. That way, where it hits right here, flushes up a little better. So you can kind of see, I'm just balancing those out. These right here, guys, if you watch the videos for these, they are not warped from paint. These came to me. The entire box was outside in the rain, and the entire box got kind of warped. But with enough hot glue, I think I can still keep those in control. So this is going to be my basic design. My next thing that I want to tell you is right here where we've got these raw cut edges. We are going to want to add a little bit of color to that. And to do that, I've got this little mixture that I keep handy for most of my edges. And it is predominantly this Waverly wax in the antique. And then kind of a blob of just the Waverly ink in their chalk paint. I've mixed those together to tone that shade down some and darken it. It helps neutralize some of the honey red tones in that ink color. It gives me a little bit better color for shadowing these edges down. So it's not very difficult. It's just like when you're doing your regular edges. The only difference is that I tend to come in this direction. Let me load that up. I kind of come in at a little bit of an angle so I can get along those edges. And I'm just adding a little bit of depth of shadow there. And I'm going to do that with the red, but I'm not going to really shadow it very much with this lighter color. As a matter of fact, you could probably get away with not doing it. I'm going to add just a little bit of shading there, not by much, you can see. And that way it just gives those edges a little more natural look. And you can see I'm not really doing a whole lot to that. I'm just kind of covering that bright, stark white just a bit. You kind of see that little bit of difference that makes. And once we've done that, we can start gluing these down. My edges are done. I'm ready to start trying to adhere these. I'm going to have a little bit of fun getting these down, considering they do have this warping in them. And like I said, this had nothing to do with my paint job on these particular ones. That whole... I got a whole box in, and you can order an entire box of this, by the way. You can get an entire case of it through Dollar Tree. But the entire thing, every single sheet came out with that curve to it after sitting on my porch in all the rain. So I'm having to hold these a little bit of extra time to help adhere it down with all that warping. But it'll be fine once we get the backing on and get our framing around it. It's going to help keep that really flat. Okay, now that my red and white stripes or ivory stripes are laid down, I'm going to go ahead and start with my blue. So I've got the first one bumped all the way up against there. I want you to see I did not completely make these super flush on every one of them next to each other. I left a little bit of spacing, just a hair. I mean, just a tiny, tiny hair. Part of the reason I use the black background is so that I don't have any white showing through, especially on a color that's darker like this. You would have the white kind of show through any gaps you might want to leave. So that's why I do that. So now it really gives kind of this illusion of more depth and dimension. My blue one, I've already got it glued and bumped up against there really hard, really well. You can see that now that I've got the hot glue down on those ones that were warped, they've held down really, really nicely. I was a little worried because we actually have more rain right now. So I was worried that they weren't going to cooperate, but they did just fine once I put enough glue on there. And I'm just using Dollar Tree hot glue. You don't want to use caustic glues, guys, because they can have chemical reactions with your foam core and make it'll make it shrivel that foam core up, kind of like when you spray paint foam. Hot glue works fine. Try not to get a whole lot on your foam edges and corners, just because sometimes the heat from your glue gun itself can melt that. And now I've placed my last blue star-filled piece. I'm going to come in with this other 1-inch filler and pop it into place, and then we'll go ahead and get started on our frames and our hardware accessory. Now that all that's glued in place, we're ready to frame this up. You notice that I've got one side of this painted. That's what I want towards the inside, because it's a whole lot harder to paint that inside later. This edge I'm not too worried about, because I can get it once I go to paint all of these edges out. And that's a result of me just using my 3-inch ones that were already painted up. I used those and just cut them in half. So I'm popping one of my frame pieces in place, and I'm just going straight across. I'm not making this complicated. We're not going to miter this. This is a really rustic look, so this frame is fine for that. Actually, I think it's really excellent for that for me, because I went in and added some rustic looking nails, and I'm going opposite on my frames. And the reason I do that is so that I can cut those side sections to fit really, really snug. That way, if I'm just oops, I didn't mean to bump you guys. That way, if I'm just a hair off on my cuts or measurements, I feel like I can play around a little bit better that way. At least on this particular style frame. And this is what I mean. Now I can come in and measure this out and really get a snug fit in there to where this thing pops in and will almost stay by itself. So once you have those cut, you want to make sure that you hit that little bit of raw cut edge there too, so that when this white bumps up against there, you won't really see it. And now you can see when I cut these custom like that, they pop in so nicely. I don't know if you heard that, but I get such a snug fit. And with that pressure of it being such a snug fit, it helps keep, it keeps my piece from wanting to wobble as much. So that way there's not a lot of bending down through here. Getting super excited. I'm ready to put the hardware and decorations on. All my framing is in place, and this is where I want to come in now, right about this stage, and do my edges, because once we get our hardware on there and glued down, you have to kind of work around it to paint these out. I'm just using a Dollar Tree kitchen sponge that I've cut in half because these cut edges can be really sharp and they'll destroy your bath sponge. So I'm just using the mix that I showed you guys, and you can kind of see once, if you get the alignment really good and get this painted really well, these edges are very similar to the layers you see on woods like plywood. So I'm not going to take the time to do that. I'm afraid of getting fingerprints all over this color. So I'm going to have to work around it later. I want to jump into my hardware. So I'm going to bring in my little bin of goodies here. Let me set this fella to the side for a moment while that paint dries. And I want to tell you about some things that I've got to play with. First of all, I used some of these. These are the Dollar Tree Party Favor Yo-Yos. They have a bigger one, and you could certainly use that, but there were so many in this one. I just thought this was a little more cost effective. All I did with these is I pulled them apart, which is very, very simple. They have this little pointy edge that goes into this one. You pull it apart, take out the string, and I spray painted mine first with a flat spray paint, just because it sticks better to that plastic. The only thing about spray painting that plastic, even with a spray paint that was flat, is the plastic still looked kind of shiny. So I came back in with some of just my Waverly black chalk paint, or ink chalk paint, and went over that again to take some of that shine down and give it more of a flatter iron kind of look. Now for mine, I want to show you guys, I took this Dollar Tree chalk writer. It's not really chalk though, guys. It's like a wax pencil. And in order to give it that brushed kind of bronze look, or whatever finish that you kind of want to call that, that usually has the black with a little bit of gold or bronze metallic in it, that's what we're mimicking here. So with this being a wax, once you kind of draw it on there, your fingers will create heat and friction that'll melt that wax and blend it really nicely to kind of get, maybe you guys can see that aged bronze, brushed bronze, whatever that official wording for that look is. And I'm going to do these inner little sections too, that way they show up a little better, just kind of highlighting the edges. So once I did my pieces, now you're going to want to use this piece. I was drawing on this one, but we're not going to be using that one for this one. I'm using this guy that has the innie. I added real hardware to mine just because I knew I had stuff like that around. And I'll show you what I mean. I'm having fun playing with this here. I like this little bit of detail that it adds. Adding that little bit of kind of rubbed metallic look to it. And it's such a simple way to do it. Okay, now that I'm done playing with that, I came in and I had these reel washers, and I think they were like 97 cents at Walmart. I had some reel washers, and I actually had some really short stubby screws in my little screw bin, and so that's what I'm actually using. But I want to show you some alternatives to that also. So all I did was take the washer and the screw. I'm going to fill this little hole right here with some of my hot glue. Watch your fingers. It doesn't take much. That hole's not very deep. And the little screw just fit down in there so perfectly. And now I have real metal that will coordinate some, I think, with my galvanized star. So those are my wheel pieces. Another option is using a real washer, but there are these scrapbooking brads. These are Recollections, And they will pop into your foam core so easy. But if you can see that, this set has the flathead look, and let's see, and it has a Phillips head. They're super cute. I love these things. So there's those. I am going to be using this package of carpet tacks, and I am really loving these for foam core projects, and here's why. If you can see these things, they do not look like a clean machine manufactured nail. They look hand hammered. They look old and vintage, and the heads are all a little bit different size. So I'm going to be using these. They're a perfect length for the layer of foam core that we have created. They go straight into it, and they don't pop out the back. But some other options would be painting out some just plain thumbtacks. One of the other things I wanted to show is for washers. If you don't want to use real washers, Dollar Tree has a lot of cool things that you can take the components out of. So this little 4 in a row game has some plastic circles you can take the components out of. This little wooden 3-in-1 board game has these little round pieces. And all I did with these is just take a Dollar Tree rhinestone, pearl, whatever one you happen to have, attached to the center. I'm going to show you just how easy this was. To get that metal look, Dollar Tree's metallic markers, they're metallic permanent markers. I am not kidding. I can put this side to side with a Sharpie, and I like this one better. I have a Sharpie version just like this, and this one feels like the metallic is shinier, and it applies a lot heavier. So I just stuck them together and colored it with this marker, and it went over wonderfully. So that is an option to use as hardware pieces. Some of my other videos have different varieties, but you can see it yields a very, very similar look. This one is much lighter weight, so if you're doing something that maybe is a smaller project, but you want some hardware, this is a really good way to go because it is super lightweight. So now that my wheels are crafted together, I'm only going to need the 2 wheels. I want to show you what I did to get the rest of it. I'm using the Dollar Tree slightly larger size popsicle sticks, a couple of the little wooden cubes that they sell. Really quick, I want to show you a trick for painting these, especially if you're trying to get them to not look like wooden popsicle sticks. So obviously I've already put 1 layer of paint down. And the coverage is really good. However, you can still tell that this has a wood grain to it. You can still kind of see that wood graining. So I am taking just a little cut piece of this Dollar Tree kitchen sponge. I'm going to take my chalk paint. And I'm going to sponge that on there. Chalk paint is slightly thicker, which is one of the great things about it. I could have done this on the first layer, and it would not have shown that wood grain as much as it did with a brush. And once this dries out, it's going to leave, some of that will self-level and flatten, but some of that texture will remain, and it will hide a lot of the graining that you see and feel on those, so that it looks a little less like popsicle sticks. I'm going to set these to the side. I just wanted to point out, this to me was such a much easier way to paint these things. They tend to slide all over. A lot of times I hold them and I don't even paint this. If I'm just doing 1 or 2, I just hold the tip and I don't even paint the end that I'm holding, because I know that I'm going to end up cutting that off typically. So these are some cheater ways. I want to share this with you guys. Since this is a Texas project, some of you are familiar with HEB. They have these 6 disposable cutting boards over by their zip bags and kitchen bags and things. And it's $2.99. Sometimes it's a little cheaper when they have their coupons and things. It's about $2.99 for the 6 of these. The really cool thing about these is they're fairly sturdy. They're a good size. They're 12 by 15 inches. And I use these over and over to paint with. It's got like a waxy, laminated surface to it. And the paint kind of just slides right off. I could pretty much show you right here. If I took this and just ran that across there, that paint's going to pretty much scrape or rub right off. You don't even have to really get these wet to clean them off. It's a really good way to have a paint surface. I typically will try to paint on a paper surface or something like that. And something like this, when I would go to pick it up off that paper surface, once it had time to dry, it would rip that paper off with it. So this waxy surface right here is made an incredible paint surface for things like this, especially because once this is dry and I remove this, I can wipe this down really quickly and all that paint's going to come right back off. Let's talk about the remaining portion of our hardware. So now that I'm doing this in just the plain sticks because I thought maybe they'd be a little easier to see than the pitch black. So the next step, once you've painted your popsicle sticks, and I just chose to do it in that order because I got a little better coverage on my painting that way. I am cutting this popsicle stick down to 4 inches. If you see these things right here cut through that like butter, I've got a lot of hand and arm issues right now. It's still very simple for me, other than my hands are not always long enough to get a good grip. But once I squeeze it down and get my hands on it, these cut into this like butter. You could do this with scissors, but I tend to split them. If you saw the flag video, I split one entirely, just holding it. So this right here pops through it. I think these are 10 snips. I have another tool that I like to use, but for cutting across those, I really prefer this one. Oops, I need to cut both of these. Once you got one cut down, I used my ruler to cut down one, and then once I got one cut down, I just used it to cut all my other ones. It made it faster. That went flying. The next step you want to do is make sure your edges are sanded a little bit because they'll split, they'll splinter, they'll look a little rough. You want to kind of soften that up. This is like a really fine surface here. Anything super heavy grit-wise, and it'll shred these. So I cleaned up my edges pretty well. To touch them up, once I had already painted, I just came in with one of these and did that raw edge where it was cut. Made it so simple. Okay, so the next thing I did was I'm going to take one of these blocks and I'm just going to add a blob of hot glue to one side of it. I stood up my popsicle stick like this on my surface. And I kind of slid that right into it so that I had some good flushness from the top and the side. Holding it that direction really seemed to help me be able to do that. I'm going to add some glue on this side. And you could do it with just one popsicle stick, but I really wanted to bulk these up some. I wanted to bulk that look of the hardware up some, which is why this one is kind of more 3D than some of the others. And I'm just doing the same thing here. And you've got like this weird clothespin kind of looking thing. And we're almost going to use it that way. So I went ahead and did mine ahead of time so I could just slide them on. Okay, guys, you can see I've got my edges painted. They're almost dry. I've got everything glued down to this point. I'm getting ready to do a few accessories. If you notice, I changed my mind about my star. I'm going with this dimensional one. I don't know why. I like the extra dimension on here. You go with whatever star that you want to put on there. But, I don't know. I thought it was a fun little bit of difference between just one of the flat ones. So I'm going to go that direction. You do whichever way you want to do. As far as stars go, you can use any of the galvanized ones that Dollar Tree sells. They have so many. They have their flat large ones. They have the 3-pack. I don't have it handy. They have the 3-pack of the small ones. They have wood ones. You can make one out of foam core and do some kind of wood look to it. Do it straight up white. Whichever you want to do. I don't know. For some reason, I thought it was fun to throw a little whimsy in there and have the 3D version. And I'm going to see if I can kind of hide where the hole is. I think like that. If you notice, I just kind of fake rusted mine a little bit. I just took a little bit of the same mix here that I've been using for my edges. Just tap a little of that on there. No big adventure needed. I just wanted to tone it down a hair. It was a little shiny. This is the part that I like. The details can matter, and that's where you really kind of personalize things. So I like to throw as many out there, even though I'm still usually fairly indecisive as I go, because there are so many different ways to personalize pretty much every single piece that we do together. I think there's lots of fun ways you can personalize most of this. So that was really all I did. Now it's a little less shiny and new. I think it works with the really aged wood colors that I used for mine. Now I want to get into the fun things that I added for myself. And let me get this paint off my hands and let's jump in there. So like I said, I have a thing for using these antique looking carpet tacks. They were really cheap, like right at $1 a package. I know hardware things and all those things have gone up. I think maybe they're like $1.29 a package now. I cannot remember, guys. Don't hold me to that, but they're still pretty cheap, and it doesn't have the amount in here. It just says it's 2 ounces of them, but 2 ounces of these is a lot. And you're about to see, because I'm going to be using 16 of these for sure. And all I'm going to do is take them and push them in. I think it's a little easier to hold it with some tweezers or something like that. Just for me, because my nails are long. But you can see how easy that is. I'm doing this. I'm pushing it in with my left hand that has 0 strength. And it's still going in. I'm just kind of putting mine in this square looking pattern right here where my frame pieces meet. If you get a little crooked, don't worry. Just kind of straighten it back out and keep going. It's so easy to work with. Can you see that? Look, all of the little heads are slightly different and almost imperfect. I love that little detail on projects like this for sure. And I'm going to go all the way around and do that very same thing to all 4 of these little intersections. So this is a lot of them. And I did it to my other flag too. So there were 16 on that one. There's 16 on this one. This package still has a whole bunch. And I've used it before on other tutorials. So you get a lot of embellishments out of this. And once you go 3 layers thick with your foam core, you're good to go with these. If you're worried about them coming out, I mean, once they're wedged in there, they're wedged in there pretty good. If you're worried about it, just before you go to place it and slide it in, pop a little hot glue there and then slide it in through the hot glue and it'll glue it down. I haven't had any problems, but I don't have young children anymore to mess with any of my stuff. If you still have little ones, always think about their safety and using little embellishments. But I don't think it's a problem. It's not just going to They're not just going to fall out of it on you. There's something satisfying also about pushing that down into there, especially with it looking like wood to your brain. I don't know. It makes me feel very superwoman. I do. I find it oddly satisfying. I guess I didn't have to make you watch all of this. I do find such satisfaction in doing this. My brain works weird on me sometimes. So there's all of my corners. You can see that's just such a fun detail. You could do this through where we're going to put our popsicle stick hardware also. It takes a little work, but you can definitely work those through the popsicle sticks. I did not opt for that this time around. I could have put some pearls there, maybe some of the stick-on pearls to add more to it. I really didn't opt for any of that this go around. I left that part fairly simple. So I measured out on my other one. I came over about 4.5 inches to place mine. You can place it wherever you want to. As a matter of fact, you could place it down the side if you wanted to and have it come longer down here. I went for this 4.5 space. I thought it was an easy one to remember. I'm marking it from 4.5 over on there. I'm going to mark it 4.5 over on here. That way they're even on both sides. Oops, I went a little crazy with that line. So to get these on there, you can see the width is perfect for what we have done here. All I did was put a little glue in this part, a little glue in this part. You guys can see that. It's a little stringy here on me. And I'm going to carefully, without hopefully making too much of a mess, slide it right in place. It's such a good fit. I'm just going to hold it there for a second. Make sure that I don't make it go kind of cattywampus. Do the same thing on this side. And I don't know if you can tell the benefits of sponge painting these over painting them with a paintbrush. They have such a better texture now. The other thing you want to look at is try to make sure that you're coming down evenly here so that these parts are sticking up fairly evenly. So now I've got those pieces in place. I've got my wheels. And I'm going to go fairly heavy on these. Mine aren't very heavy even with the real washer and the screw. They're really not very heavy at all. And I'm just going to decide right about there. I think it's pretty close to where I put it on my other one. I do plan on doing one of these that will actually be movable. But y'all, I'm so limited on the crafts that I have to pick and choose to do right now. It's very frustrating. Last option I want to show you, and this is not necessary. You could just leave it with the hardware looks that's on there right now. But I did take a 1-inch black piece. I made sure all of my edges are painted. Everything's painted so it's one solid black piece. I slid mine in there and just popped a little glue and glued it down. And you can see now we have, I'm going to go ahead and do that and pop my little glue under there. Make sure I've got this thing pulled down pretty close to the edge evenly. And pop that part in place. But now you can see this looks like real working hardware. And if you wanted to, you can come in here, add little details right there. You know, your little screws and bolts and those kind of things. Hopefully my little star is dry enough that I can pop this little guy on here. It's still a little damp, but I think I can do it. The interesting thing about working with this metal is you got to work fast to hot glue it. But I don't really recommend a lot of the caustic E6000 type glues on this foam core. I really don't, because it can break down on you so quickly and you not realize that it's coming. It can take hours to soak through that paper, and then those chemicals eat into that foam. But when the hot glue hits that metal, it tends to want to dry so fast. I think I got it pretty good. But there you go. You can see it's got a nice little heft to it. It's a pretty good size piece. Let me grab my big ruler and tell you it should be close to around 23 inches, which means I space it out almost exactly as I did my other one. So it's 23 inches tall with your full hardware there at the top. And of course, you're 30 inches wide. This is a pretty good size piece for what we did and what was invested in it. The other part I want to tell you guys is the scraps that you have taken off these pieces, if you're going to do both of them, keep those, because I think there's other fun things that can be knocked out with them. I've got them to the side. I might do a video just for scraps from these projects, just to give some ideas. But that's everything I got. I hope you find it useful, helpful. I know it's long, but you know what? I've decided if they are long, you guys can use fast forward, and I promise I will not be offended. So this is it. I hope you like it. I can't wait to get it grouped with my other ones, and I will talk to you guys soon. Bye, y'all.